This is just beautiful to listen to. Brian Kilmeade on Fox News was very upset about this New York Times report that systematically analyzes the Trump cognitive decline. Something we've been begging them to do for some time, and they did it. So credit to them for that. And Brian Kilmeade did not like this reporting. I'll get to the reporting after we watch this clip of Brian Kilmeade and Fox and Friends discussing first the interviews that Harris is doing, and then you'll see the moment I'm talking about.
They're spreading so much misinformation. I talked about this on Friday, a commercial that's always on this morning show that I watch that's live while I'm getting ready to come here in the morning. And it's a commercial about this military mom who says, we're trying to do IVF, we want to get pregnant, and we move around state to state because I'm married to a man in the military. And Donald Trump is going to take that right away from us in different states. And Donald Trump is not going to do that. He's been...
By the way, while you're listening to this, do please, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button. We're trying to race towards 1 million subscribers. You can help us towards that goal by clicking the subscribe button. Easy, free, simple, but makes quite the difference.
Pro IVF, he's not going to take that away from moms. I would say so many of the people in all of our families have been born because of this beautiful blessing of IVF. So he's said time and time again, I'm not against that. But to talk about Kamala Harris doing serious interviews tomorrow, Brian, she's going to be on The View, Howard Stern, and Stephen Colbert. Friendly interviews.
A lot of times she blows them, too.
Right.
So anything could happen. Her prompter stopped on Friday, and she kept repeating the same 32 days 4 or 5 times. But yet the front page of the New York Times last night, and maybe it's today's, that just broke last night, is Donald Trump mentally okay? He just spoke for an hour and 45 minutes in front of maybe 60 to 100,000 people. He does 3 interviews a day. He's going to do a whole bunch. He's doing WABC this morning, doing a whole bunch of interviews all week. And they're like, is Donald Trump okay? Why doesn't he do a cognitive exam? You have Kamala Harris, who can't get through any type of interview and make any sense. And that's why the people that are closest to her don't want her doing any. They asked a follow-up question to what you said about lying about IVF. He goes, do you, on an abortion ban? So, Shannon Bream, so when he says, I'm not going to sign an abortion ban, do you think he's lying? He goes, yes. What are you supposed to say to that? Right. So lying when you disagree with a policy that'll push your campaign further, all I can tell you is the polls are a flat-footed tie, and we'll see who's going to outwork the other. Well, it looks like 60 Minutes is not going to get Donald Trump. But she sat down for a 60 Minutes interview that's not going to air till next Sunday? That's bizarre.
I thought it was airing. They're spreading so much.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's airing tonight. So a couple things on that. Interestingly, I'm not actually that concerned with arguing over if Kamala Harris is the one that we need to talk about, cognitive, this, that, the other thing about, and if Trump's actually the one who's super coherent and knows how to talk about policy. We make that argument. I've reviewed a gazillion interviews with you all and speeches. I trust people's eyes and ears on that one. Just go yourself. Go on YouTube, search up a Kamala Harris interview, search up a Trump interview or Trump speech or a Kamala Harris rally, and compare for yourself, okay? I'm not really worried about that when they try to flip it around like that. They'll latch onto these moments where Kamala Harris sort of, as people do in interviews, stalling to think of her next point, will say something slightly circular and then get right back to speaking in detail about policy in a coherent way, in a way that Trump never could. They'll clip those little moments and say, see, this is the whole interview. It's not, though. And when we've reviewed full Trump events or full Trump interviews, it's clear which candidate is more coherent. And Trump, with his age, has that extra level of concern, as we saw around Joe Biden. Quickly, before getting into this New York Times reporting, though, the other thing Ainsley Earhart mentioned was that Harris, sure, she's doing much more interviews now, because that was the criticism originally. She's not doing interviews. She's hiding. Now she's constantly doing interviews. But they're softballs. But she's doing 60 Minutes. You can't say that's a softball interview. And Trump agreed and then ran away from it and decided he wasn't going to do it. So that's also such a weak criticism when Trump is just doing friendly interviews himself while Kamala Harris is going in more challenging scenarios. And in the 60 Minutes interview, it hasn't been aired in its entirety yet. But from the clips we've seen, she was being pushed on some stuff for sure. Now, this New York Times reporting, Trump's speeches, increasingly angry and rambling, reignite the question of age. And it goes through a lot of what we have. Former President Donald J. Trump vividly recounted how the audience at his climactic debate with Vice President Kamala Harris was on his side, except that there was no audience. We watched that moment. He says the audience went crazy. There was no audience at the debate. What? The debate was held in an empty hall. No one went crazy, as Mr. Trump put it, because no one was there. Brutal. Anyone can misremember, of course, but the debate had been just a week earlier in a fairly memorable moment, and it was hardly the only time Mr. Trump has seemed confused, forgetful, incoherent, or disconnected from reality lately. In fact, it happens so often these days that it no longer even generates much attention. Thank you. He rambles, he repeats himself, he roams from thought to thought, some of them hard to understand, some of them unfinished, some of them factually fantastical. He voices outlandish claims that seem to be made up out of whole cloth. He digresses into bizarre tangents about golf, about sharks, and his own beautiful body, saying he's more beautiful than Kamala Harris and that he looks better without a shirt on than Joe Biden. So strange. He relishes a great day in Louisiana after spending the day in Georgia. He expresses fear that North Korea is trying to kill him when he presumably means Iran. As late as last month, Mr. Trump was still speaking as if he were running against President Biden 5 weeks after his withdrawal from the race, and talks about how it's fair for people to be questioning Trump's cognitive abilities. Many have for a long time, but mainstream media is just sort of catching up to it. If you look at his public appearances, and given how much attention, much of it perfectly warranted, was given to Biden's advanced age, and part of why he ended up stepping out, or the big part he cited as to why he stepped off the ticket, passing the torch to the next generation. This should be a standard that's applied equally. Doesn't mean the analysis is the same, but both should be held to the same standard. And then they even did a computer analysis, it says, of the length of his speeches, which Brian Kilmeade cited how long Trump will do these events as proof that Trump is cognitively fit. But see, actually, in the way that we're seeing the decline with Trump, him becoming more rambly, him taking longer and struggling more to express a thought, and so these things drag on and on and on, is a part of it, not a refutation of it. His rally speeches now last an average of 82 minutes compared with 45 minutes in 2016. Proportionately, he uses 13% more all or nothing terms like always and never than he did 8 years ago, which some experts consider a sign of advancing age. And again, we'll hear from MAGA a lot the argument of, but look at how long he'll stay on stage and talk. Are you watching though? Yeah, he goes on for a really long time. You're right. Are you listening to what he's saying? Because just standing on stage making noise out of your face doesn't mean that you're making sense, that you're cognitively fit, that there aren't concerning signs of the impact of his age or something on how he's delivering his speech and articulating his thoughts. Then it says, similarly, he uses 32% more negative words than positive words now, compared with 21% in 2016, which can be an indicator of cognitive change. And he uses swear words more often. And there was another healthcare news outlet that did a similar study. It talks about how he references things that are often back in the 1980s and 1990s when he was in his tabloid-fueled heyday. He cites fictional characters, the Hannibal Lecter stuff, and he'll accidentally say Silence of the Lip instead of Silence of the Lambs. And he says, where's Johnny Carson? Bring back Johnny, who died in 2005. He ruminates on how attractive Cary Grant was. He asks supporters whether they remember the landing in New York of Charles Lindbergh, who actually landed in Paris and long before Mr. Trump was born. At one point, he said most people don't have any idea what the hell a phone app is. Yes, we do, Donald. And just a bunch of other examples that we've reviewed before. We'll try to remember to cite or include the link in the description of this YouTube video if you want to read the full thing. It is fascinating, and they try to do it in a meticulous way that's not just, haha, look at this, look at that. But as you saw, some percentages of how much he's using those filler terms that aren't really indicative of much meaning or are super hyperbolized. And then I think if you're just honest with yourself, separate from citing particular metrics, and you watch a 2016 interview or a 2012 interview versus interviews we're seeing in 2024, there's a huge difference. He can't engage with topics the same. And when he does attempt, for example, to answer a policy question, often it comes out so jumbled and you don't really know what he's saying, but you can assume because we know what his main points are, so we connect the dots. But if you were just putting it into sort of a text analyzer, ChatGPT, what does this mean? I think it really struggles. I know it does because I was preparing, and we're going to do this, if I can remember, on today's bonus show, a segment where we read the transcript of a Trump answer and then the ChatGPT rewriting of it to see if it can make more sense. And it really struggles to derive what it is that Trump means in some of what he's saying. And so I think we should be honest about that. And this article goes through people who've worked for Trump saying, yeah, this is not the same Trump, and he's struggling. He gets confused more. He's more incoherent, etc. So no, Brian Kilmeade, this New York Times article is not a hit piece. It's not super politicized. It's just analyzing and documenting what we've all been observing. Let me know what you thought in the comments.